helicopter shot coming across the harbor, the Statue of Liberty prominent in the foreground, and smoke and devastation and tragedy in the background. A tragedy that continues to unfold, and one that still has many, many unanswered questions. We have a report now that a car bomb has exploded at the State Department. We are working to confirm that as well. Howard Safer is a former New York City Police Commissioner, the top police job here in the city, and he joins us for a few moments. Mr. Safer, what do you see? When you look at that, what do you see?
I see something that's unimaginable. I see what is a police commissioner's worst nightmare. This is a situation that obviously was well planned, well coordinated, and the loss of life that's taking place down there is just incredible, and is going to strain the emergency services of this city to the hilt.
Are you hearing any specific information? Are you hearing anything about the number of injuries, the number of fatalities, the number of people in that building, those buildings? Are you getting any of that information from?
Well, I know there are 50,000 people who work in the World Trade Center. I know that every ambulance and every fire company in the city and has been called in and dispatched there. It's unimaginable, but the loss of life is going to be huge.
You're as familiar with the city's plan or plans for these kinds of incidents as anyone in the city. In all honesty, does the plan cover the scope of what appears to have happened here?
No, we have an Office of Emergency Management. The plans for responding to a disaster are probably as good as any in the world, but nobody ever would contemplate that we would lose the two World Trade Centers and in this manner.
Tell me what's happening there, would you guess, in the sense that what are police doing? What's the first thing that has to happen? Triage?
The first thing is triage. The first thing is to identify who can be treated, who cannot be treated, to get those ambulances to hospitals. Every hospital's emergency room is open and I'm sure working right now, and this is just a situation, it's like a war zone. And you have to logistically treat it like a war zone. You have to have your front lines, you have to have your support, and you have to have people who are constantly in there doing something. I was also fire commissioner before I was police commissioner, and it's no longer an issue, unfortunately, but a high-rise fire like that is almost impossible to fight.
At this point, would you say that every police officer, and there are what, 40,000?
There are 41,000 police officers
in the city have been called in?
Oh, every one of them. I know every firefighter has been called in.
And how many firefighters?
There are 14,000 firefighters, and I'm sure we'll be getting help with equipment from our adjoining communities as well. I mean, this is a logistical exercise that makes the first attack on the World Trade Center, relatively small.
Because of its scope.
Because of its scope.
And its place in the building itself, that it was high up in the building. Does that complicate things?
It does. Once you get above the 10th floor in a fire, it's almost impossible to fight a high-rise fire above the 10th floor, except by sending firefighters up there and using hose stands. Then you run into water pressure problems. I was just thinking about this not long after the World Trade Center bombing. The engineer who designed the World Trade Center told me that the World Trade Center was designed to withstand a 707 direct impact. Well, obviously, that wasn't the case.
It seems not. We are getting reports, and we are getting lots of reports, and we want to be careful to tell you when we have confirmed them and not. But we have a report that a 747 is down in Pennsylvania, and that remains unconfirmed at this point, and so we will check on that. I want to get back to the former commissioner in a moment, but again, to briefly recap, you have buildings in Washington now evacuated, the White House, the Pentagon. We have a report that there has been a collapse at part of the Pentagon itself. There was an explosion. You can see the Pentagon on the right side of your screen, and that is a live picture as well. On the left side of your screen, you see the situation here in Lower Manhattan in New York, where both of the World Trade Center towers have collapsed. This morning, as people were coming to work, all airports in the country have been shut down, international flights, that were heading this way are being diverted to Canada. The White House has been evacuated. The president was in Florida this morning, and he spoke briefly and said, in truth, the kinds of things, and about the only kinds of things you can say in moments like this, that the government will do everything it can to hunt down whoever is responsible. This is obviously an extraordinary crisis for the president, and the first crisis, major crisis like it, that he has had to face, compared to the plane that was the force down in China. That seems small right now compared to what's going on here in New York and in Washington, and the president is headed back on Air Force One from Florida to the White House. The White House itself has been evacuated. We are trying now to figure out where the relevant players in Washington are, where the vice president is, the national security team, where they are meeting. We are working very hard right now to find out what both the FBI, what the CIA, what the Secret Service knows. It is chaotic now in two cities. You have major buildings that have been evacuated. It's very difficult, obviously, to get phone calls through as you look at the Pentagon, and I suspect we are also getting a report as you look at these pictures of the Pentagon, and I, in all honesty, suspect you see them a little more clearly than I do, but part of the building appears to me, as I look at it, to have collapsed. That's the Pentagon, and those pictures are live at 10:40 Eastern Time this morning. We have a report now of a fourth explosion at the Trade Center, and Brian Palmer, CNN correspondent, is as close as he can get to the area. Brian, what can you tell us?
We are, in fact, as close as we can get. I'm not going to give you an exact time frame, but several minutes ago we were standing in front of the United States courthouse when we saw the second World Trade Center disappear from the skyline. It collapsed before our eyes, again, in a plume of ash and debris. People rushed north. We had a New York City Police Department officer here with us who witnessed the first collapse, but he actually had to dash off to duty. We've been watching people crying. Some people had relatives in the buildings. They are not sure whether they are whether they've been evacuated, removed for the buildings, or not.
Was there, Brian, did it sound like there was an explosion before the second collapse, or was the noise the collapse itself?
Well, from our distance, I was not able to distinguish between an explosion and the collapse. We were several hundred yards away, but we clearly saw the building come down. I heard your report of a fourth explosion. I can't confirm that, but we heard some boom, and then the building fold in on itself.
We are told, Brian, hang on, we're told that the Secretary of Defense is being evacuated from the Pentagon. The Pentagon, a portion of the Pentagon has collapsed after, and I'm not precisely sure on this, and I want to tell you when I'm not precisely sure, but apparently a plane or helicopter hit part of the Pentagon itself. As you take a look at the pictures there, I must say every time we hear a plane coming up overhead, it gets a little nervous where we are. Whatever is happening and whoever is responsible, we have no way of knowing if it's played out yet or if it's just going on. So every time we hear a plane go by, we wonder what the situation is and where it is headed. That sound, we're told by a person here, they believe that is a fighter jet. Federal office buildings around the country, is that correct? All over the country have been closed, or just in Washington?
Well, we were not allowed into the federal courthouse here, where CNN maintains a workspace. The officers just said we're not allowing you in. I think that's a security precaution.
Got it. Stay with me a little bit. All federal office buildings now, all federal office buildings in Washington, D.C. Are being evacuated as we speak to you now. There are a variety of reports, and it's important to try and put this in some kind of order, but the most important things to tell you if you're just joined in is that what has all the makings of an extraordinarily well-planned terrorist attack on both Washington and New York has taken place this morning. the trade centers here in New York. The 2 World Trade Center towers have collapsed after being hit by a plane. Maria Hinojosa joins us on the phone. She is in New York, down near the building. Maria, what can you tell us?
Well, I'm actually at St. Vincent's Hospital right now, where at about 40 to 45 minutes after the first explosion, they started seeing patients here. What I'm hearing, and I have not been in the ER yet, is that they have at least 100 patients or more, that several of those people were dealing with issues of smoke inhalation, many of them throwing up, that there were several people who went directly to the operating room who are in very critical condition. Outside the hospital, people are coming in trying to help, to donate blood. Essentially, everybody here at this hospital is in a state of shock. I mean, I walked into the testing area, and the women here who usually just draw blood are also extraordinarily moved and shocked. They're moving in and out of the emergency room to try to help as many people as possible. Now, outside a block, about a block away from here, where you really had a bird's eye view of the 2 twin towers, which are the landmarks of New York City, the people stopped, the entire traffic has stopped. People have poured out of buildings and were watching, in fact, as one of the towers collapsed. And then you're really seeing a lot of people trying to move north, away from any place downtown near the World Trade Center area. People are just walking. The subways are stopped entirely all around the area of the World Trade Center. You can't get below 14th Street, and there just feels to be like a massive exodus of people walking north to get away from the area as far away as they possibly can.
Maria, I know Kitty Pilgrim is with you as well.
Right, I'm right
Kitty,
here.
tell us what you've been able to report on.
I'm actually reporting from Kennedy Airport at the United Terminal, and I was here this morning flying out. When they made an announcement at about 20 of 10 that all flights were grounded, people thought it was just a normal course of airport business these days, and so there was not much of a reaction, and then the news started to trickle through. It was not an official announcement made over the intercom.
Kitty, let me interrupt for just a second. The Associated Press is reporting that federal officials fear that a second hijacked plane or another hijacked plane is headed towards the Pentagon, and I'm looking for the time on this. We will continue to check that out. Kitty, I apologize for interrupting. Why don't you continue? Did we lose her?
Everyone didn't react, but then the news came through. I have never seen Kennedy in this condition. I've been here many times. People are in absolute shock. No one's talking. They were just staring at each other with their arms dropped to their sides. A pin could drop in the United Terminal. There were a couple hundred people there, and no one was saying anything. After about 20 minutes, people rushed to the phones. You cannot phone out. There's no real access back to the city. People are trying to get back. They've unloaded the baggage from the planes. They've asked that everyone pick up their bag and take it out of the terminal and take it home. And they're asking everyone to please leave. People are just finding it difficult to leave. They are not officially evacuating Kennedy Airport at this point, at least at the United Terminal. The attendants have been asked to stay. And again, there's still several hundred people standing around not knowing what to do. No one's even speaking.
And again, for people, Kitty, thank you, not familiar with New York, Kennedy is the major airport handling international flights into the city. It is also an enormous complex of 7 or 8 or 9 terminals.
That's exactly right. And in fact, the baggage has been unloaded into a separate terminal from where I am, and they're asking people to walk over, pick up their bags, and take them out. It's virtually impossible to get from place to place at Kennedy, and of course, bridges and tunnels into Manhattan are inaccessible at this point. No one has anywhere to go.
Kitty, thank you. And we'll get back to you. Chris Plant at the Pentagon has more. He joins us on the phone. Chris, what can you tell us?
Hi, this is Chris Plant at the Pentagon. Can you hear me?
Yes. Chris, we hear you. Go ahead.
All right. The area to the west of the Pentagon has been evacuated further back by law enforcement and military officials as they anticipate a second aircraft arriving at the Pentagon. It's been deemed to be threatening enough where I saw at least one F-16 fighter jet in the air over the Pentagon headed to the west where the plane was reportedly coming in from. Again, they're saying here that a second aircraft is expected to arrive at the Pentagon sometime soon. They take it seriously enough that they have scrambled at least one fighter jet that I saw, probably either from the D.C. Air National Guard or the Maryland Air National Guard, both of which fly F-16s. The west front of the building of the Pentagon along Route 27 has now partially collapsed. About a 60-foot section of the building laterally has collapsed the entire 5 stories. The building is obviously, the fire is traveling inward in the building toward the courtyard, and this wedge, as they call it, of the Pentagon, the westernmost wedge,
Chris,
which was just refurbished and was in fact reinforced for terrorist attack and for just this sort of thing. I know that there were a significant number of injuries. I'm unaware of any numbers on fatalities at this point. People here who came from the building are suggesting that surely there were fatalities, but no one could confirm any. I have spoken to a number of people that I know who pulled people out of rubble. There were severe injuries. There are a number of helicopters here evacuating injured people, and I am told by one senior military source that the plane in the side of the building has been tentatively identified as a Boeing 767, a full-sized airliner, Boeing 767. But that at this point they're waiting for the arrival of a possible second plane, which has been deemed to be a threat, and as I said, fighter jets have been scrambled to address that matter.
Chris, stay with us. That's extraordinary bit of information coming out of Washington now. Let me add to something that we said earlier. We have a report now that a large plane crashed this morning north of the Somerset County Airport, which is in western Pennsylvania, not too terribly far from Pittsburgh, about 80 miles or so. Boeing 767 jet. Don't know whose airline it was, whose airplane it was, and we don't have any details beyond that which I have just given you. We don't know if this is somehow connected to what has gone on in New York and Washington, but we do know that another plane has crashed, this one about 80 miles south of Pittsburgh, or at least to the southeast of Pittsburgh. Rose Arce, one of our producers here in New York, joins us on the phone. Rose, what do you have that's new?
Yes, just a while ago, I think you saw that collapse of the top of the World Trade Center. Well, it looks like a large chunk of that debris has hit a building very close by, about 2 blocks away next to an elementary school, causing another explosion. So for the last few minutes, I've been watching people running from that direction. There was one man, I'm not child, but you saw on the street. I've seen several emergency service workers carrying other emergency service workers from the scene. There's a haze everywhere. It's very, very difficult to see, but there has been the whole area has been covered by soot and ash. So it looks almost like snow. So as people are coming up the street running from the scene of this new explosion, you can see them slipping on the ash and literally having to drag each other up the street. There's an incredible amount of panic down here in downtown Manhattan as people are realizing that they really need to leave the area entirely after spending the last hour or so just watching this from afar.
Rose, stay with us. Terrific work. Let me throw another couple of pieces of information out as we continue to put this all together into a straight line if we can. The United Nations has been evacuated. The United Nations building on the east side of Manhattan has been evacuated. The city is in, this is election day, a primary election for mayor and city council races here in New York. That election has been postponed until further notice. Obviously, we are in the middle of an extraordinary catastrophe that started about 8:45 Eastern Time here in New York when one plane crashed into one of the towers of the World Trade Center. About a half an hour after that, as people were converging, as fire and police and rescue teams were converging on the scene, a second plane appeared to the west of the Trade Center buildings and slammed into the second tower. That's what you just saw. Fire shooting out the north and east side of the tower. Shortly after that, we began to get reports of events taking place in Washington. An explosion which first came to us as a fire at the Pentagon. Now there's a report of a second hijacked plane heading towards the Pentagon. It is believed that one of the planes, perhaps both, but one of them we have been told was an American Airlines 767 that hit one of the trades a bit longer. Lose track of time a little bit in these situations. The first tower, or let me correct that, the south tower, the second tower, the one to the left collapsed. It collapsed in a cascade of smoke and spark, and what we cannot tell you is if there was a second explosion that caused that collapse, or if it was simply, that's the first one, that's the south tower collapsing, and that was about a half hour, give or take, after the planes hit the tower. Then shortly after that, just as the smoke was starting to clear away, the second tower, and that's what you're looking at now. Again, this was not very long ago, 10, 15 minutes ago. The second tower, it almost looks like one of those implosions of buildings that you see, except there is nothing controlled about this. This is devastation. How many people? There are 50,000 people who normally go to work in the Trade Center buildings. How many of those people had arrived already? How many of those people were trapped in the upper stories? How many of those people have been hurt? How many of those people died? We cannot tell you now. We can tell you that hospitals throughout the New York area are receiving literally hundreds of patients, and they are performing triage. They are trying to figure out who could be treated, who needs help first. This is sort of standard operating procedure. We are just being told now that Israel has evacuated all its diplomatic missions around the world. Israel has evacuated its missions. We are told now that Yasser Arafat has condemned these attacks, and we don't know yet who's behind them. Britain has condemned these attacks. Germany has convened its National Security Council, and we will check and see if events are going on in those places or if that is simply a reaction to what has gone on here in Washington and in New York. CNN's Gene Meserve joins us on the phone from Washington. Gene.
Hay Street, which is one of the major thoroughfares here in Washington, it is absolute gridlock. It takes about 15 minutes to drive one block. Ordinarily, this time of day, there'd be nothing near this kind of traffic. You see pedestrians filling the sidewalks, many of the businesses and offices here having closed. You see cars absolutely pouring out of the parking lots, contributing to the absolutely horrendous traffic situation. Many people trying to use their cell phones. However, cell phone service has become very difficult in this town because of the crush on circuits. For the most part, people appear to be very calm and collected. I will tell you, though, that as I drove, I looked at the car next to me full of some young women who I would guess were in their 20s, several of them crying their eyes out, obviously very upset as they listened to the radio and heard the news of what is happening in this city in New York also. Aaron, back to you.
Gene, thanks. Gene Meserve in Washington this morning as she and the rest of the organization continues to gather what facts we can, what facts are available in the wake of the extraordinary chaos that has followed this extraordinarily horrendous terrorist attack. American Airlines, we are told, one of the planes involved in this was a hijacked American Airlines 767 out of Logan Airport in Boston. American Airlines will say what is known as you look at the White House being evacuated a short time ago, or is that live? And I'm not sure on my monitor which it is. I believe it's taped from a short time ago. In any case, American Airlines will talk to reporters in about a half hour or so, 11:30 Eastern Time. One of its planes involved in this, and we will bring that press conference to you live when it happens. Here in New York, hospitals are being overwhelmed as hundreds of patients are being brought in and being treated. We cannot tell you, we would not even begin to guess what the numbers in this will be, how many people will have died by the time this day is over, how many injuries have taken place in both Washington and New York. But as former Police Commissioner Howard Safer told us a few moments ago, obviously the numbers are going to be extraordinary. Who do we have on the phone, guys? Just help me out here. Patty, are you there?
Yes, I am here.
What do you got?
About an hour ago, I was on the corner of Broadway and Park Place. That's about 1,000 yards from the World Trade Center. When the first tower collapsed, it was a massive explosion. At the time, the police were trying desperately to evacuate people from the area. When that explosion occurred, it was like the scene out of a horror film. People started stampeding away from it.
Patty, I'm going to interrupt you. for a second. We told you there was a second plane that went down, this one around 80 miles or so southeast of Pittsburgh. We'll try now to connect with KDKA TV in Pittsburgh. Well, just so much for planning. We will try again. Again, we have reports that a plane has crashed in the Pittsburgh area, southeast of Pittsburgh, about 80 miles. And at varying times, we've heard that this was a 767 and a 747. I'm not sure it matters which it is. What matters is that a plane has crashed in the Pittsburgh area. The Pentagon continues to monitor reports that another plane, a hijacked plane, is headed for that area. All flights have been canceled around the country. International flights heading towards the United States are being diverted into Canada this morning. Patty, let me go back to you. As we look at some tape from the ground. Patty, why don't you go ahead and continue?
Okay, Aaron, I'm in the main building of Pace University, which is inside the fallout zone of all the debris from the two building collapses. At the time of the first building collapse, I was at Broadway and Park Place. It was a huge cloud of smoke. It overcame the crowd. People were stampeding. Literally, the debris was so thick you could not see your hand in front of your face. I ducked around into a building that was on Park Place and Beekman Street. When I was in there, people were coming in, they were crying, they were wailing. You couldn't see anything outside. After the smoke had cleared a little bit, I came outside. The scene was like a ghost town in the financial district, very eerie. You saw people being wheeled on gurneys away from the site of the explosion. People were coming out with masks over their face, anything they could put over their face, because the air was still very thick with debris. The ash on the ground is at least 2 inches thick. It's more like snow cover, a very eerie snow cover blanketing downtown Manhattan right now. Now, at the time, I was back on the corner again of Broadway and Park Place. At that time, the police started running toward us, telling everybody to move who was left on the street. I looked up, and that's when I heard the, pardon me, that's when I heard the explosion. That's when the second tower came down. Again, whoever was left on the street started stampeding. I'm in the office. Right now I'm in the main building of Pace University. People are crying. They have gas masks on their face. Authorities are making people go toward the basement. They're just doing anything that they can to move people away from the financial district. But again, it is a very horrifying scene down here, very eerie, like a ghost town.
Patty, let me interrupt you. Mayor Giuliani is on the telephone, is part of New York One's coverage. We join our affiliate for that.
Mayor Giuliani, since we have New Yorkers listening, and obviously their thoughts are with the people who are down there.
Urge them to remain calm, to remain at home, or to remain at their place of business, unless they're in Lower Manhattan. By that I mean south of Canal Street. If you're south of Canal Street, get out, walk, and walk slowly, carefully. There are plenty of police around, but just walk directly. If you can't figure out what else to do, just walk directly north. That'll get you out of the dangerous smoke area. It'll also do us a big favor. It'll open up those streets, because we're going to be moving a large number of ambulances and emergency personnel in and out of there all day. I've talked to the governor. He is putting the National Guard on alert so that they can relieve our police officers and our firefighters later this afternoon. And we've asked the federal government for help from the urban search and rescue team. So right now, we're using all of our police and firefighters and emergency personnel to help the people down there. Later on, we're probably going to need reinforcements.
Mayor Giuliani, I realize that it must be more than a chaotic situation, particularly since the bunker has been compromised and cordoned off. But can you give us any sense? There are so many people watching now who must have loved ones down in that area and are concerned of the systematic...
My heart goes out to them. I've never seen anything like this. I was there from shortly after it happened and saw people jumping out of the World Trade Center. It's a horrible, horrible situation. And all that I can tell them is that every resource that we have is attempting to rescue as many people as possible, and the end result is going to be some horrendous number of lives lost. I don't think we know yet, but right now we have to just focus on saving as many people as possible.
Can you give us a sense of if there is in fact some system being implemented, what that system is, and where people are being taken?
People are triaging. People are being taken to every area hospital possible, even virtually within minutes. I drove down right past St. Vincent's Hospital, and I could see them actually on the street ready to take people, and that was within minutes of the first airplane hitting the World Trade Center. So the hospitals are ready. We'll be moving them to all different area hospitals, triaging them. The main thing is having those streets open so that we can get people in and out of the southern part of Manhattan as quickly as possible so that we can move them, to hospitals all over the city.
And Mayor Giuliani, we'll let
system
you...
is in place. They're doing it. We just need the cooperation of people in getting out of there.
We'll let you get back to the operations there, and we do appreciate you taking the time for us here.
But once again, the only thing to do now is to remain calm and try to assist in the rescue effort.
Thank you.
Now let's pray.
That's New York's Mayor Rudy Giuliani talking to a CNN affiliate New York One here, saying that clearly there's going to be tremendous number of lives lost on these attacks here in New York, urging people to stay calm and to leave the area calmly. The area is in the southern part of Manhattan, way down on the tip of Manhattan Island. The mayor urging people to calmly move north. CNN's Jamie McIntyre is at the Pentagon. Jamie, why don't you start, if you can, at the beginning here as we try and put some order to all of this. What happened?
Well, let me just describe the scene that we have here, and I'll back up a little bit. But right now I'm looking at the charred facade of the Pentagon, a huge gaping hole on the side where the Pentagon heliport is located, the side that faces Arlington Cemetery. In front of me is a long line of rescue personnel with backboards. They're just waiting for victims to be brought out so they can rush them to nearby medical facilities. I see a few victims being treated on the grass outside the Pentagon. Firefighters continue to pour streams of water onto the side of the building, and a huge black cloud of smoke continues to billow out. It is a scene of utter destruction here. I'm sure it pales in comparison to the World Trade Center, but I've never seen anything like this myself in the history of the Pentagon. There's been nothing like this. Again, a huge gaping hole. You can see the exposed 5 floors of the Pentagon offices just ripped apart. Our report is that an aircraft of some kind, and at least one witness identified it as a civilian aircraft, hit the side of the building shortly after the incident in the World Trade Center this morning. People who were in their offices nearby reported hearing a huge explosion, seeing shards of shrapnel come by their window. The entire Pentagon has been evacuated. Short time after this attack, there were urgent announcements made over the loudspeaker telling people to quickly get away from the building because they had reports of a second plane heading this way just 2 minutes away. F-16 jets were scrambled over the Pentagon. I saw several of them go by, but no second plane ever materialized, and the building remains completely evacuated as firefighters continue to pour columns of water on the devastated side of the Pentagon, and rescue personnel continue to whisk victims away. We have no report at this time of how many casualties. Clearly, dozens and dozens of people have been hurt, and we presume that there have been some deaths as well. It's hard to imagine otherwise, considering extent damage to the side of the building. And I can see just some of the windows side, a stretch of the building, perhaps 40 or 50 feet wide. This looks like it has collapsed under the weight of the impact. Aaron?
Jamie, thank you. So we have planes hitting the Pentagon, or plane hitting the Pentagon, 2 planes hitting the World Trade Center's towers in New York. Alan Dodd-Frank joins us on the phone in Lower Manhattan. Alan?
Aaron, just 2 or 3 minutes ago, there was yet another collapse or explosion. I'm now out of sight. A Good Samaritan has taken me in on Duane Street. But at 11:15, there was another collapse or explosion following the 10:30 collapse of the second tower. And a firefighter who rushed by us estimated that 50 stories went down. The street filled with smoke. It was like a forest fire roaring down a canyon. Now, as I think Patty Sabga and others have told you, all of Manhattan is covered, downtown Manhattan is covered with thick white ash and building material. The ambulances have been coming now from as far as Long Island. All the rescue workers are being equipped with gas or face filter masks, and firefighters have been arriving even by pickup truck. Otherwise, the streets are now deserted.
Alan, thank you. Alan Dodd-Frank in Manhattan. A little more on this plane crash, which is the 4th incident, if you will. There was the plane crash at the Pentagon, crashing into the Pentagon. There were the 2 planes that hit the World Trade Center here in New York. and we don't know whether this fourth one is related or not, but the report is that a 747 en route from Chicago to New York City crashed in Somerset County, Pennsylvania, about 80 miles to the southeast of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. That's the incident. That's what we are hearing.
And I'm standing next to a fireman. He said, yeah, they just bombed the Pentagon, too.
Our colleague, Jeff Green, well, we have a little more sound here from witnesses.
I'm with the fire alarm company. The doorman goes to me, wow, I never seen a plane flying so low. And we looked out at it, all of a sudden, boom, it seemed like it wasn't even real. And we came running over here closer to the place, and all of a sudden we saw the other explosion. I don't know.
I was in B tower. A tower.
What floor were you on?
B1.
What floor?
The first one.
What happened? Tell me.
When a big explosion happened, some guy came out. His skin was all off. I helped him out. This is him all over. There's people jumping out of windows. I've seen at least 14 people jumping out of windows. It's horrific. I can't believe this is happening.
Anything else that you saw? Were you there for the second hit by the plane?
About 10 minutes later, the second building went off.
Did you see it?
Yes, I saw it. It just blew up. A big explosion. People started running. It was just chaos everywhere. Yes, I was right there. I was down in the basement. Came down. All of a sudden, the elevator blew up. Smoke. I dragged the guy out. His skin was hanging off, and I dragged him out, and I helped him out to the ambulance.
Thank you.
The words of some of the witnesses here in Manhattan this morning, and the pictures of what will, I suspect, before this is over, go down as one of the most horrific days in our lifetime. We're joined by our colleague, CNN's Jeff Greenfield.
Aaron, you know what? In 1993, when terrorists bombed the World Trade Center, their plan was to knock one of the towers into the other, bringing them both down. That disaster was averted, and bad as that was, in a sense, America was lucky. Another terrorist attack in the planning was interrupted to blow up the Lincoln Tunnel and submerge dozens, maybe hundreds of people. At the eve of the millennium, a suspected terrorist, was intercepted, you remember, at the Canadian border on his way to Seattle. And I know that not so long ago, former President Clinton, in a private talk to a group, ruminated on how lucky the United States has been over the years with the combination of luck and the skill of anti-terrorist people, to avoid such things. What we are seeing now is nothing less than the worst nightmare that one could imagine come to life, probably worse than anyone could have imagined. You may remember that Tom Clancy wrote a novel that ends with a terrorist hijacker crashing into the Capitol. The worst act of terrorist violence on American soil, the Oklahoma City bombing, killed fewer than 200 people. All we know today is that tens of thousands of people worked in that complex that has been destroyed. And I hate to say it this way, but this may be the day that America's luck ran out.
Well, it is hard, isn't it? I mean, you look out here, and you see the Statue of Liberty to the right, and these buildings off to the left, the attacks on Washington. We don't know a lot about who's behind this or what this is all about, but the symbolism of these attacks is extraordinary. CNN's David Ensor is in Washington, and he joins us. David?
Aaron, I'm talking to U.S. officials who are obviously working on who is responsible for this. Their working thesis is that this is overseas terrorism, not domestic. They say they cannot rule out additional attacks yet to come. In terms of claims of responsibility so far, there is an Agence France-Presse report in which a group with the word Palestine in the name claims responsibility. There is also a report quoting personnel close to Osama bin Laden, the fugitive Saudi accused terrorist, denying that that group was involved. But again, U.S. officials say they can't shed any light on whether these reports are correct or incorrect. Usually when this kind of attack occurs, you have claims of responsibility from all sorts of people who had nothing to do with it, so it's a very fluid situation at this point. But the Central Intelligence Agency of the United States has been evacuated from its headquarters in Langley, Virginia. There are some key personnel still in the headquarters, but the operations center has been moved elsewhere. U.S. officials saying they don't want to talk about where exactly the headquarters staff and operations staff has been moved to, but that staff is focusing now on trying to find any shred of information that could help the U.S. government figure out who is doing this and how to put a stop to it. Aaron?
David, you tell me if I'm right or wrong here. As a practical matter, there are not a whole lot of groups that the United States government knows about that are sophisticated enough, have the kind of money, the resources to pull off something like this. Fair enough?
That's absolutely true, and obviously, despite the denial, attention will quickly turn to the bin Laden group because it has long tentacles. It has connections with all sorts of other groups. We saw at the Millennium a group of Algerians apparently involved in trying to arrange bombings in the United States, and now there is evidence being produced in court sessions that those Algerians were working for the bin Laden group. So that group certainly will come under immediate suspicion. There are very few others that could have pulled this off. Aaron?
Right. I mean, just because of the enormity of it all and the sophistication required to stage these multiple attacks, this is not something some small cell can pull off. This is obviously a group or groups, well-financed and extraordinarily well-organized.
That's correct. Now, another thing you'll notice is that you remember the attack on the USS Cole in the Yemen harbor. That was the first time that kind of an attack using small boats with bombs in them had been used against an American warship. It worked once. Now the U.S. Navy has taken steps to make that much more difficult to do. Officials saying this may work once. They will now have to take measures to try to make sure that this kind of thing can't be done again. But these are apparently hijackings of civilian aircraft. So it was a sort of modus operandi that was dreamed up in some evil terrorist's mind and done on a massive scale here today, Aaron.
David, thank you. CNN's David Ensor, our national security correspondent, on what he is hearing, what he knows, what the reports are as we approach 11:20 Eastern Time. For those of you just joining us, and as you can see on your screen, the Taliban, the government in Afghanistan, expected to make a statement soon, and we'll monitor that for you. For those of you just joining us, let me try and put as many of these pieces together as I can as we stand here in New York. At about 8:45 Eastern Daylight Time this morning, the first of the Trade Center towers was hit by a plane. It crashed into the south side of the tower. About a half an hour later, a second plane came from the right, and you can see it coming behind the first tower, and then it hits the tower, and you'll see the flame and smoke coming out, I guess 3/4, maybe a little more, up the tower. That's where this all began. About a half an hour after that, the first of that tower that is now, you see, in flame there in your shot, collapsed. The top collapsed. And there was an enormous, I don't want to say explosion, but there was an enormous plume of smoke, sparks, as we looked over from where we're standing. And then a little bit after that, and I want to be careful on time because it seemed perhaps 10 or so minutes, but I'm not sure. The second tower, which in fact was the first one hit, collapsed as well, and that's what you're about to see. Our reporters in the area say they heard loud noises when that happened. It is unclear to them and to us whether those were explosions going on in the building or if that was simply the sound of the collapse of the buildings as they collapsed, making these huge noises as they came down. But as we look back, the smoke now, which has gone from white to a kind of gray, clearing away. We are, I guess, Jeff, I want to know what's behind the smoke, but I have the worst feeling is that very little.
And the fact is that we've already been hearing from even the fragmentary reports from people on the ground, stories beyond horror, people jumping out of windows because of the flames. The fact that this happened shortly before 9 and then the second hit shortly after 9 means that most of the people were either right in the vicinity or actually at their desks. So one doesn't want to be overly grim, but the fact is there were thousands of people were in these two buildings.
Again, 50,000 people come to work in those buildings. Many thousands more pass through those buildings every day. There are retail shops on the lower floors of the Trade Center.
It is where the PATH trains from New Jersey come in.
Correct. The trains, the commuter trains coming from the other side of the river from New Jersey come in and drop off and pick up their passengers, so it is an extraordinarily busy area. It is also an area, for a number of reasons, rich in symbolism to this city and to the country. You can see from where we are the Statue of Liberty in New York Harbor in the scene. So that's what happened in New York. At about the same time, and again, I don't want to put times on much of this yet, after one of these hijacked planes hit the Trade Center in New York, events started to unfold in Washington. A plane hit the Pentagon. And then there was a major fire at the Pentagon, and the Pentagon has now been evacuated. The State Department has been evacuated. The president, who was in Florida, went before cameras to denounce, as you would expect, and as we would expect, this terrorist attack, promising to hunt down those responsible. It was the president himself who first used, at least as I heard the story unfold today, the word terrorism. There was no doubt in his mind, at least. The president now is heading back. We are now getting a report from that American Airlines says that one of its flights, a flight from Boston to, I believe, Los Angeles, correct me guys if I'm wrong, is down, or at least they've lost contact with it. 81 people on board. This would be the second of American Airlines flights to have been involved, presumably, in this event. Another flight, this one from Dulles to Los Angeles, is down with 54 passengers on board. So again, so there are two American Airlines, one Dulles, Washington, D.C. to Los Angeles, the other Boston to Los Angeles. Both American Airlines planes reported by the airline to be down. It is also believed that an American Airlines plane, a 767, was involved in one of the hits on the Trade Center as well. We don't know if there's a reason why it is American and not any other. We won't speculate as to whether there is or not. We'll just tell you what the facts are as we get them, and that's what we have. American says two of its planes down, and I assume that is two other than the one that hit the Trade Center, and you guys check that out to make sure I'm right.
And we have a report of a crash in Somerset County outside of Pittsburgh.
Right, I believe a 767, though we're getting reports perhaps a 747, which doesn't quite fit into what we believe flies Chicago to New York, is also down as well, and I do not know the airline involved there. Let me just go back okay, I do now. It's a United Airlines plane. So we have a number of planes down, a number of planes involved in these attacks. The Boston to Atlanta, if I'm reading the notes correctly, had an American 767 with 81 passengers on board, 9 flight attendants, 2 pilots.
Flight 11
reported down. That's American Airlines Flight 11, and American Airlines Flight 77, which is a 757 jetliner, Dulles Airport outside of Washington to Los Angeles International, with 58 passengers on board, 4 flight attendants, 2 pilots, also reported down. And then there is this United Airlines jet which crashed about 80 miles to the southeast of Pittsburgh.
We should also mention, I think, Aaron, that inevitably some of these early fragmentary reports are going to be needing correction, and that will be done as soon as possible. We had a report of a second hijacked plane on the way to Washington. Capitol Police were reporting that there have been no signs of that plane. We simply, at this point in this awful story, have to just tell our viewers we will do everything we can to report this accurately. If fragmentary reports need amending or correcting, that will be done immediately.
And I think in fairness here, there is in a number of places right now, perhaps 4 or 5, chaos. And numbers that come out aren't necessarily going to hold up. And in our reporting, we will be a bit conservative on some of this until we track it down. There's no point in allowing this thing to seem worse than it is. It is already horrendous, and we don't need to make it any worse by misstating numbers, and we want you to keep that in mind. CNN Medical Unit reports that the Center for Disease Control in Atlanta, the Centers for Disease Control, is preparing bioterrorism teams to respond to the incidents. This, we are told, is simply precautionary. We have absolutely no reports and no evidence that there is any biochemical or bioterrorism going on, but clearly what is happening in every department of the United States government, and I suspect in every department of most major cities right now, the plan that they hope they never have to implement, the plan that they spent years preparing, is now in effect, not just here, not just in Washington, but around the country, because no one knows precisely where this is going. CNN's, my colleague Judy Woodruff joins us from Washington. Judy?
Aaron, we've been watching this here in the Washington Bureau. I'm in the studio now just a few blocks from the Capitol, from the United States Capitol, and the first thing I want to tell you is that everyone I'm sure on their minds is God rest the souls of those who've lost their lives this morning in New York, in Washington, near Pittsburgh, in Pennsylvania. It is just a story for which there are no words to describe. Here in Washington, we are keeping a very close watch on the Pentagon. You've been reporting, Aaron, and other CNN correspondents. A plane evidently crashed, a commercial jetliner crashed into the Pentagon earlier this morning. Approximately 60-foot section of this building, which is, of course, the headquarters of all the military for the United States, was on fire as a result of this crash, and then collapsed. These are some of the pictures we've been bringing our audience from the Pentagon. We've watched people being treated by first aid personnel there. We have no information yet on casualties, on the number of people who may have been hurt or may have died in this incident, although emergency personnel on the scene have said surely there have been casualties there. Elsewhere in Washington, every federal building has been evacuated or is in the process of being evacuated. I'm now told that United Airlines is now saying that flight, can you tell me the number of the flight? 93 has crashed in Pennsylvania. Now, a flight from Newark, New Jersey to San Francisco. Now, we don't know if this is the same airplane that Aaron was reporting a little earlier crashed in Somerset County near Pittsburgh. Aaron had reported that some minutes ago, and now we are getting a confirmation from United Airlines that its flight, United 93, on the way to San Francisco has crashed. So we now have at least 2 commercial airline companies in the United States. American Airlines reporting 2 of its passenger jets down, one flight, Dulles in Washington to Los Angeles, and then another flight from Boston to Los Angeles down, and now we have United Airlines reporting at least 1 airline or airliner down with concern about another one. So the pieces of this story continue to come together. I have to say, in my 30 years as a journalist, I have never seen anything like this, never covered a story of the dimensions of this, and I'm sure it's safe to say that's the case for my colleague Aaron Brown and for any one of the other many correspondents, producers, and others with CNN and our colleagues at the other news networks. And I would just remind you that CNN right now has producers, correspondents all around the world who are watching for any more information that we can bring you at this point, as Aaron and Jeff Greenfield have been saying in the last few minutes, everything we have right now is fragmentary. We are simply reporting to you what we are learning from police, from the federal government, from the CIA, from David Ensor, from our other correspondents. And I'm now told that former U.S. Army Commander General Wesley Clark is joining us on the telephone. Former commander of NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, is joining us from Little Rock, Arkansas. General Clark, from your knowledge of the military, you know the Pentagon. What are you thinking right now?
Well, good morning, Judy. First of all, we've got to try to assess what's really happening, and as all of the news reports indicate, it's clearly a coordinated effort. It wasn't announced, and it hasn't been announced that it's over, and we don't know how it will finally conclude, so there's likely to be more trouble before all of this concludes. So we've got to protect the American people first. We've got to look after those who are injured. We've got to take precautionary measures to deal with future incidents, and I think all of that's underway with a lot of responsible action by people everywhere. The damage at the Pentagon is unclear from all the news reports that I've seen. The one report that said it crashed into the Army side of the building. There are command centers in various places of the Pentagon, and there are many other alternate command centers. So I don't think there's really any issue about the command and control of the United States Armed Forces. I'm sure that's very solid right now.
General Clark, why do you say there's likely to be more trouble?
Well, we're hearing still reports of aircraft that are out there. There's no way of knowing when all of the possible incidents have either taken place or been aborted by whoever it is that's behind this. And so we have to be ready for whatever might happen next.
General, can you give us some sense of, clearly the United States has never experienced anything of this magnitude, but what are the leaders of our military, the Joint Chiefs, the Secretary of Defense and others, what presumably are they doing right now in order to be on top of a situation where you have the Pentagon on fire, New York City in a state of chaos, and every federal building in Washington evacuated?
Well, first of all, we'll be trying to assess what happened. We'll be making sure that the protection posture of our bases worldwide and all of our units out there is raised so that we're able to protect our forces and our family members, and then we'll be looking to provide assistance to wherever such incidents might occur. Whatever military capabilities there will be that could be of use will be certainly made available to the other agencies of state, local, and federal government who are involved in trying to deal with these tragedies right now. Then beyond that, we'll be waiting for the information to come in about who may have been behind this, and we'll be looking at what measures can be taken to strike and prevent further actions or in punitive retaliation.
Well, speaking of that, General Clark, wouldn't you agree there are very few of the terrorist groups, at least that we're familiar with, who would have the capability to pull off something this coordinated on this scale?
I think that's exactly right. There's only one group that has ever indicated that it has this kind of ability, and that's Osama bin Laden's. So obviously that'll be the first suspicion.
Clearly we are all in a state of shock, General Clark, but is it fair to say that you're not truly surprised by this, given what we've heard from that particular group? And again, we don't know who's behind this, but given what we do know.
Well, there have been many threats made against the United States and threats of terrorism, and we know that the World Trade Center has been a target. We know that aircraft have been hijacked, and we know that car bombings are used in many places in the world, and there's no doubt that for a long time there have been groups who have tried to target the United States. Normally, many times we've gotten indications. We've been able to take actions that the American public never knows about that have broken up these attempts. In this case, for whatever reason, we didn't have the information and we weren't able to take the actions to break it up.
And General, what do you say to those Americans who are looking at these horrific pictures that they've been watching now for almost 3 hours on television, who are thinking, will I ever feel safe again in an airplane, in a tall building in this country?
I think that will be one of the primary issues that has to be addressed by government leaders, is how to restore ever a sense of normalcy to the country. Will it ever be the same? And that's a question everybody will be asking. But I think it's too soon to expect any answers to that. I think we've got to assess this. We've got to track this down. I think one thing that comes through very clearly now is, if this is terrorism and international terrorism, then clearly there has to be a much greater degree of cooperation between nations to deal with this. Whoever did this lives somewhere. He's supported by someone, and people know him, and someone knew that these events were being planned. And if we didn't have that information, we should have. And I think that's one resolve that will come out of this from nations all over the world, that more has to be done collectively together.
But in a large sense, General Clark, whoever was behind this has clearly succeeded in the most horrific and devastating way.
Well, it's been a tragedy for America, there's no doubt about that, and for so many people and their families, our hearts go out to them.
We're looking, as I'm talking with General Wesley Clark, who is a former NATO commander. He's talking to us from Arkansas. We're looking at helicopters patrolling, I believe it's the area around the Pentagon, although I can't tell by the banner across the lower part of the screen. We do know that President Bush was in Florida this morning. He abruptly cut his trip short in order, we think, to fly back to Washington. And General Clark, while you are with us, what would the plans be for the President in this situation without giving away secure information? Would the President necessarily return to Washington? Is there always a plan in place in these situations?
Well, there would have to be a plan always in place to take the President to where he can best control what's going on and monitor it and make decisions, and also where he will be safe. And you can be sure that there are plans and backup plans and alternate plans to the backup plans. There'll be no shortage of efforts underway to assure his safety and his ability to maintain the continuity of government.
And once again, just finally, General Clark, as we look at these live pictures of the Pentagon, describe for us what you know of the section of the building that evidently was hit by the commercial jetliner.
Well, that picture seems to be from the area of the bridges, the 14th Street Bridge, looking at the corner of the Pentagon that is opposite from where the strike was. So it looks like the strike hit between the 4th, 5th, maybe 6th corridors of the Pentagon. Perhaps on the Army side of the building, there are a number of offices there, administrative offices, where Army leaders and staff officers work on a daily basis. They deal with things like planning and logistics and congressional relations and public affairs in that area. And the Army leadership was probably close to where that may have impacted. There are a number of other facilities below ground, some of which have been relocated, and it's impossible to see from that picture what the condition might be there.
General Clark, any final word before we let you go?
Well, I think that we've known for some time that there were groups planning this, and I think the American people should know that the men and women in government and all the agencies have worked very hard and very diligently against this. Obviously, we didn't do enough. We didn't either have the tools or the cooperation or somehow get the information that we needed to have prevented it. And you can be sure that those men and women are right now resolved to do more and to be more effective. This is a national challenge, and I'm confident that we'll meet it.
All right, General Wesley Clark joining us now from Little Rock, Arkansas. He is, of course, the former commander of NATO. General Clark saying earlier In his estimation, there is likely to be more trouble given the coordination and the scale of these devastating attacks this morning, September the 11th, 2001, on New York City and on Washington, D.C., and at least 4 commercial jetliners involved in these different attacks. Patty Davis, our Washington correspondent, here with me in the studio. Patty, you have some information about one of those airliners.
That's right, Judy. Well, United Airlines, as you said earlier, is confirming that its Flight 93, that's a Boeing 757, it was en route from Newark to San Francisco, did crash near Pittsburgh. It is also now saying that it is deeply concerned about another flight, that is United Flight number 175, a Boeing 757 that was traveling from Boston to Los Angeles. It said it is deeply concerned about that flight right now. We don't know the status of that particular flight right now. Now, the United Airlines CEO, James Goodwin, saying that the thoughts of everyone at United are with the passengers and crews of these flights, including prayers. United is not saying how many people on board each of these flights, how many flight attendants, how many pilots. So at this point, that is their statement. They're saying one plane. They are confirming Flight 93 that was from Newark to San Francisco crashed near Pittsburgh. Another flight deeply concerned about United Flight 175, Boston to Los Angeles. That's a Boeing 767. Now, on a typical day, there'd be some 4,000 flights of all different aircraft, including military, general aviation, commercial aircraft in the skies. As we've reported here on CNN, the FAA has issued a ground stop, the first ever on all departing flights in the United States. Also, the flights that crashed into the World Trade Center and also into the Pentagon, we are told by the FAA that that was the most restricted airspace that you can get. That was Class B airspace. It doesn't get any more restricted than that. So there should not have been any flights in the areas where those planes came down.
Patty, let me just ask you, the flight that United Airlines says it is, quote, deeply concerned about, the Boston to Los Angeles flight, are they confident that that is not one of the airliners that has already crashed?
United is not going beyond its statement at this point. They're just simply not saying, Judy. I think they're trying to figure it out as much as anybody else. The FBI involved in this as well, and they're trying to track this.
Because what we're trying to do here is piece together whether there is still a flight out there in the air that there are questions about, and I guess I don't have enough information in front of me right now to identify that. And you're saying the airline is just not giving that right now.
Right. Yeah. They are confirming that the one has crashed, but the other one they are not giving any information at this point. So unfortunately, we can't piece that puzzle together just quite yet.
Patty, I would add, as I'm listening to you and we're watching these pictures from, I believe this is the Pentagon, but I'm not sure. I just turned away. This is the Pentagon. I am told that there are wire reports quoting a senior official with the radical Islamic Jihad movement. Now, again, CNN has not confirmed this. It is the radical Islamic Jihad movement saying the attacks are a consequence of United States policy in the Middle East. And again, this is a wire report. We have not been able to confirm it, but we are simply at this point passing along to you as much information as we have. As we look at these extraordinary pictures, developments, the likes of which I think none of us who are reporting to you today have ever seen, I'm going to turn right now back to my colleague in New York, Aaron Brown. Aaron.
Judy, thank you. As we approach noon, about quarter to noon Eastern Time, it was about 4 hours ago that this all began. About 3 hours ago, thank you. At about quarter to 9 Eastern Time, the first of the planes hit the World Trade Center tower, about 30 blocks or so from where we are. And you can still see now the smoke coming from that building. The first of those planes hit, and then 18 minutes later, and we can show you this one, the second tower was hit. That plane, you see it on the right side of your screen, coming behind the tower, and you will see the flame and the smoke coming from the front. as that plane, perhaps a hijacked plane, we have, CNN's been told that an American Airlines flight out of Boston, a 767, was hijacked. And that was about 18 minutes after the first. Then as rescue crews began converging, as people desperately tried to get out of those buildings, some 50,000 people work in the Trade Center towers here in Manhattan. As they were trying to get out, the South Tower collapsed. It collapsed in an enormous plume of smoke and spark. And what we can't tell you is if there was a second explosion or if this collapse was simply a structural collapse caused by the plane that hit it perhaps a half hour before. And then just a few minutes after that, it wasn't very long, as you will see, it happened again. The second tower came tumbling down, and you can see that it almost looks like one of those planned implosions, but of course there was nothing planned, and it was not an implosion, as you see.
That was the first tower collapse that we
there
just
we go.
saw.
Here's the second one
This
coming.
is the collapse of the second tower.
And so now as we stand here, both towers, the tops of both towers are gone. Behind somewhere that plume of smoke that continues to rise over the Trade Center, what is left of those buildings, we cannot tell you. We cannot tell you. In Logan Airport, where at least two, perhaps three of the planes involved began their day, officials now are meeting with reporters, and we can pick that up live.
That we've had various reports on to call these following numbers. American Airlines, 800-245-0999. Secondly, family members can call a Massport number, 617-568-3100. We've also urging people not to come to the airport at this point in time. We've increased the shuttle buses from the terminals to the MBTA Blue Line stop, and the MBTA has increased the frequency of subway transportation. We are in close communication with the FAA, the FBI, State Police, Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And that's all I have right now.
So you've got to tell us.
What flights do you have reports on?
The flights, I cannot confirm or deny any flight numbers because I have not received official notification on any flight numbers.
How can we get all in? So it'll be everybody who's got a flight.
Okay, I do believe several of the media outlets are broadcasting several flight numbers. I believe they broadcast flight number 11, American Airlines. I don't know at this point in time.
Were the passengers hijacked?
Do not confirm that.
Has the airport accounted for all outbound flights?
That's outside of the scope of the airport's responsibility. We're leaving it up to the FAA to conduct that activity.
Joe, what is the code? Joe, what is the code Fort Knox? We have reports of employees screaming Fort Knox around the airport at the time that the planes went into the world.
That I don't know what that means. Doesn't mean have any connotation here at Logan Airport.
What about planes that are flying in here? Are they being rerouted somewhere else?
Aircraft were flying into Logan Airport. We did take some arrivals, but now since the airport is shut down, these flights will be diverted to Canada.
They're not taking flights either, we think.
Are you screening passengers?
Remove them from another area, yes. They're being directed to seek either public transportation or their own transportation out of the airport. Leaving the airport? No.
How long do you anticipate the airport to be closed?
It's indefinite this time. We'll be meeting with the FAA. We'll be conducting analysis of our intelligence that we have. We'll make a determination later on this afternoon. Pardon me? I can just tell you briefly, we have shut down security checkpoints. We've moved everyone away from the boarding gate areas. We've increased police presence dramatically. We've requested additional state police be sent to the airport. And we've shut down some construction activities around the airport.
Is this the highest level of security ever, Joe? Is another flight from Boston?
I can't confirm or deny that right now.
Was there anything unusual about the boarding procedure of this flight?
I don't have any reports that would say same.
Are you investigating breaches of security? How are you getting to the bottom of this hijacking?
I can tell you we have an ongoing investigation right now. Just an initial investigation being conducted with Massport, Massachusetts State Police, and the FBI.
What do you know about United Airlines Flight 175, which is unaccounted for right now from out of Boston?
I don't have any, can't confirm or anything or deny anything on that.
Has United got a number?
No, they have not.
Joe, did Flight 11 leave on time? Were there any delays? And was there any conversation between the pilot and the tower that seemed unusual?
Flight number 11 left at 7:59. I believe it was on time. And everything went as scheduled when it left Logan Airport.
How many people were on board?
I don't have a passenger count right now.
Are you aware of any communications from the pilot?
No, I'm not.
Would its flight path to L.A. normally have taken it south towards New York, south to west?
I can't answer that. I don't have any information on that flight path.
When did the tower here detect that there was something wrong?
Again, I don't have that specific information.
You know what time?
I don't know.
You know what time this United flight left?
I have no information on the United flight right
How
now.
unusual would it be for New York that was heading to?
Again, I'm not familiar with the particular flight patterns they may have filed.
Was it a non-stop flight to Los Angeles?
I believe it was.
At what time, sir, were the flights stopped in Logan?
What?
What time?
What time was the airport shut down?
I believe we shut the airport down to arriving flights somewhere around 9:15, and departing flights shortly after that.
What happened to the flights that were in the air? Where are they?
They were diverted to other airports.
How long will the airport be down? How long?
Again, we're going to assess all the measures that we've taken. We want to, obviously, the safety and security of anyone who works here at the airport, any of our passengers, is a top priority.
Do you have a lot of baggage that hasn't been flown?
That's Joe Lawless, part of the security effort at Boston's Logan Airport. A number of the planes that have been involved in this extraordinarily horrendous event today began their day in Boston. The Boston airport, like airports now across the entire country, is closed. Every airport in the country closed. International flights, as you heard Mr. Lawless say, being sent to Canada as they approach the United States. These are scenes. These are. This is tape from the ground, and obviously this is unedited tape, so kind of bear with us. It's a little raw at this point, but this was on the ground at the around the trade center here in New York as the events began unfolding. And as you can see there, you can see that huge hole in the building of the Trade Center, both buildings standing at the time. You can see that where the plane, it almost looks like it came through the entire building.
And Aaron, we should remember what Wesley Clark told Judy Woodruff a couple of minutes ago about how much U.S. authorities have been worried about such an attack, how hard they've worked to try to fight it, how something may have gone wrong. And I believe we have on the phone right now someone who, both in fact and fiction, has dealt with justice, and that's author Tom Clancy.
Mr. Clancy, this is, I guess, a terrible case of life imitating art.
I suppose you could say that. It's a noteworthy incident. I mean, it's not the sort of thing it's the sort of thing that's best left in a novel rather than in real life. Unfortunately, one of the problems with being an author is keeping up with reality.
But Mr. Clancy, you also are very well plugged into this world. From your own knowledge, how concerned have the authorities been that something of this scale could possibly hit on American soil?
It's Jeff Greenfield, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, Jeff, you've been here to the house. I mean, it's. I had a conversation some years ago with an Air Force general about the possibility rather like this, and ended up putting in one of my books where you go where a bad guy takes an aircraft into the Capitol building during a joint session of Congress, which could effectively decapitate the whole government. And at the time it seemed rather humorous. I said, surely you've thought about things like this. And he said, well, to the best of my knowledge, nobody in my office has looked at this, but I promise you Monday morning they will be. Presumably they've been, they've considered this possibility for some time. The big problem is a person who is willing to lose his own life in voluntarily in a terrorist incident. The people like that are fairly rare, because self-preservation is indeed the first law of nature, and not too many people are willing to throw their lives away, and those who do it generally do it for religious reasons because they think there's something good waiting for them on the other side of death. In a case like this, that's going to lean people towards talking about Islamic fanatics, but we need to remember that Islam is a religion, and it's a religion with beliefs not terribly different from Judaism or Christianity. Or they believe in a God of love and justice the same as we do, and they're not all maniacs. And religious tolerance is one of the principles of our country. We need to hold on to that principle very tightly right now, because it's the principles you hold on to when things are tough that really count.
Fair point.
This was an act by a small number of madmen, and madmen don't characterize any part of humanity.
Tom, it's Aaron Brown. When you would talk to these officials in doing the research, did they see an attack of this enormity, or were they more concerned with these sort of devastating but smaller kind of hit and miss attacks that we've seen over the last 7-8 years?
Well, you don't ordinarily expect terrorists to display this degree of expertise. Flying an airplane is not all that easy. Kidnapping or hijacking an airplane, particularly with the safeguards we have at the airports right now, is not a trivial exercise. But unfortunately, the security you have at airports is not perfect, because nothing human beings do is perfect. Somebody thought very carefully and hard and long about this, and then they got some madmen to actually take control of the aircraft.
Tom, stay with me for a second. We a few moments ago told our viewers that United Airlines was concerned about another. United lost a flight near Pittsburgh earlier today, and officials said they were also concerned about United Flight 175, Boston to Los Angeles, and now we have reports that concern was justified. A second plane has gone down, United Flight 175. Again, that was from Boston to LA. And as you look at the Pentagon, which was also hit by a plane earlier in the day. Jeff?
Yes, Tom, you were mentioning that this is such a rare act, and yet we now know of at least 4 commercial airliners that apparently were hijacked and either crashed or crashed into buildings, causing death and havoc of an unimaginable scale. So whoever is behind this is of a dimension that literally dwarfs even fantasy.
Pretty much. I dreamed pretty big with my dreams, and fortunately or unfortunately, didn't get quite this large. It's not, generally speaking, it's not credible to think that you're going to find more than one person who's willing to do something like this, because people who are willing to throw their lives away are fairly rare. In this case, they got somebody who was well organized and produced a well planned and reasonably well executed operation.
Well,
and we need to find out who it was, and then to go after him. But that's going to take time. But we do have the people to do that if they have the proper support from the executive branch of the government and from the general population of our country, to identify, locate, and deal with the people who performed this act.
The president said earlier today, shortly after the Trade Center attacks, the president characterizing these as terrorist attacks, and said that the United States government will do whatever it is necessary to hunt down those people responsible. I think it is fair to say, Tom, Jeff, all of you on the line here, it is fair to say that what we know is that this is an extraordinarily large operation, and what we don't know, in a way, is just how big it is. It seems that in each passing moment or so, we get another report of another incident, and our instinct tells us that they are all connected. We have a number of planes down, 2 American airline jets, 2 United jets down. We have a plane that hit the Pentagon. We had 2 that hit the Trade Center. You're talking about something that is, I think it's fair to say, Jeff, it is beyond anything any of us could possibly have imagined. I think that with those of us who dealt with Oklahoma City, those of us who dealt with the Trade Center here in '93, as we both did, you say, that is awful what happened. And you look at what appears to be playing out today, and we have no idea yet what the loss of life will be, certainly in the hundreds. We know that hospitals here in New York are overwhelmed with people being brought there all over the city of New York and beyond.
The only piece of news that is the least bit, I guess, reassuring is that there is no report of any kind of chemical result. That is, the folks on the ground around the World Trade Center, the rescue crews, the survivors, there is absolutely no indication at this moment that there was any kind of bioterrorism involved. Not that what happened here isn't horrific enough.
Yeah, absolutely. And let me just add on again, small, medium-sized pieces of information as we go. All airlines in the country are closed down. All airports in the country are closed down. We now are being told that the U.S.-Mexican border has been sealed. We don't know if that is just simply part of a plan that the government puts into effect under a worst-case circumstance. This is certainly that, or if there is some specific reason why a decision was made to shut down that border. Our senior White House correspondent, John King, on the phone. John? John? John King, can you hear me? It's Aaron.
I hear you, Aaron.
What have you got to report for us?
Aaron, I'm standing across from the White House. I'm told by Secret Service and administration sources that all of the principals, all of the protectees, meaning the President, the Vice President, the First Lady, and Mrs. Cheney, are safe. They do not want us disclosing their locations, but I am told by a senior administration official that the plan and the priority is to get President Bush back to the White House as soon as they believe it is safe. Now, there are both operational and political reasons for wanting to do that. The White House Situation Room, in the view of White House officials, is the best place from which to monitor events and direct any operations. That is a fortified structure within the White House compound where we know the Vice President was when everyone else was evacuated from the premises earlier. Again, the Secret Service does not want to confirm for us for security reasons, or administration officials the same, tell us where those people are now, although I was told a short time ago the Vice President is still in a position to be monitoring and directing the response to these developments, and that the President, who is en route back to Washington, we're told Andrews Air Force Base is on full alert. I was also told that there are extra precautions that were taken to ensure the President's flight back to Washington was a safe one. Now, you can read into that additional fighter jet escorts, Air Force One always has some escorts with it, that additional fighter jet escorts were put up for that. Now, the political reason they want to get the President back to the White House is rather obvious. The White House believes this has been a tragic terrorist attack, and they want to send the signal that the President is back on the job at the White House. Priority one, though, officials say, is to guarantee that he can be safely brought back to the White House. And in the past half hour or so, we have seen security precautions on the street, checks being taken out on the street, on the grounds around the White House. There are snipers up on the roofs of the White House itself, including buildings around it. And a military helicopter gunship flew over the premises not that long ago, about 15 minutes ago now, and then it circled back over toward the Pentagon, where from my location you can still see smoke coming into the sky from there. But we are told the Vice President is still in a position to monitor all this as the President makes his way back.
John, thank you. Our senior White House correspondent, John King. As John mentioned, the President was in Sarasota, Florida, making his way back to Washington. Whether he'll be taken directly to the White House or not is a little bit unclear. Secret Service wants to make sure the building is safe. It is, I would add, one other symbolic reason why you would want to get the president in the White House, and that's to send a message to who's ever responsible for this, that yes, you've caused extraordinary damage and a great deal of tragedy here, but what you haven't done is shut down the American government. The president will want to get home. Governor George Pataki of New York joins us on the telephone. Governor, are you there? Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm here.
What are you hearing from the Trade Center area itself?
Well, we're still hearing that it's a horrific situation. We're in desperate need of people to help out with emergency services. The city team is there, but we've activated our National Guard and our statewide fire and emergency services, and we're going to be bringing those in to relieve the city forces as the afternoon goes on. I've been in touch with the mayor, I've been in touch with the White House, and everything that we can do and everything that can be done is being done at this point.
Has anyone given you any idea of how many injured we are dealing with down in
Not
the
at
Trade
this
Center?
point. At this point, the sole goal is to try to help as many people as possible, to get them to the emergency services, to get them the care they need, to help people who want to leave the area to leave in an orderly way, and to make sure we do everything we can to provide security throughout the city and throughout the state.
And Governor Pataki, can you tell me the degree to which the state's planning for these sorts of tragedies, and there's obviously a plan in place, and New York is, because of its place in the world, is obviously a place you have to consider a target, whether that plan envisions something of the magnitude of what has taken place this morning?
Well, you plan for any eventuality, but you never actually expect to see something of this magnitude. But we have coordinated well with the city. We're going to continue to make sure we provide all the support we can. We do have emergency services and emergency transportation running. I know the reports have been inaccurate. We do have limited rail service out of Grand Central to the northern suburbs, limited rail service out of Brooklyn and Queens to Long Island. We're working to make sure that bus service, to the extent possible, continues, and we're trying to get subway service back on track. It's not there yet, but the coordination has been excellent. It's just in an attack of this magnitude, we just have to focus on responding and helping people at this point.
And do you have any idea how many people have been hospitalized or how many hospitals are involved, whether they extend beyond the city?
Not at this point, but every emergency service, every hospital that can provide assistance is providing assistance. The people have been just terrific in their response, and we're going to continue to make sure that response is as strong as it can be.
Governor, take a moment and tell me, not as the governor necessarily, but as a resident of this state, an important player in the affairs of this state, what you're thinking today.
This is an enormous tragedy. I have friends in those towers. I have friends who were there this morning that we haven't heard from. And our thoughts go to the people who are there, to their families, to all those who are suffering at this time, and we will be there to help, and we will be there to do everything we can to make sure that the support and the services necessary are provided.
Governor, thank you. Governor George Pataki joining us here. The National Guard has been activated to support New York City Police. Andrea Koppel is on board a flight with the Secretary of State. Andrea, what are you hearing from officials there?
Well, Aaron, Secretary Powell has been in Peru since last night. He was here to attend the Organization of American States General Assembly. Obviously, when he got the news of the attacks in the United States, his aides scrambled to prepare things for him to leave. We are now, as you say, on board his plane. We're about to take off from Lima to head back to Washington. While at the OAS General Assembly, Secretary Powell said it was a terrible tragedy that had fallen on all who believe in democracy, but he said that will never kill the spirit of the American people. He also said that America will bring those responsible to justice, Aaron. There was also a minute of silence at the Organization of American States, and Secretary Powell obviously had to abruptly change his plans. He was supposed to be leaving Peru later this afternoon to head on to Colombia for his first trip there, but obviously the attacks in the United States have changed that, and he's headed back to Washington. Aaron?
Andrea, give me a sense of the Secretary's demeanor. I mean, we know this is a man who has been through a lot in his life, has seen a lot in his life. Did he appear shaken to you?
I would say that Secretary Powell is someone who doesn't show his emotions in that way. This is a man with 35 years of military experience, former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, former National Security Advisor himself, who's seen a lot in his day. And so I would say that obviously he appeared somber, very serious, but in terms of any other emotion, I would say that he's able to keep that very close to his chest.
Andrea, thank you. Andrea Koppel, flying back with the Secretary of State from South America, our colleague Judy Woodruff in Washington. Judy?
Aaron, we have joining us now on the phone from the Pentagon our military affairs correspondent Jamie McIntyre. Jamie, I understand you are inside the perimeter of where the commercial jetliner came down at the Pentagon. Well, it appears that we may have lost the phone connection with Jamie McIntyre. We're going to try to get that restored immediately. Jamie, are you there? Now we have Bob Franken, our Washington correspondent, joining us from the Pentagon. Bob, tell us what you are seeing there.
Well, what we're seeing, of course, in back of me is the smoke that's coming from the west side of the Pentagon, where, as we now know, a plane which is believed to have been a jumbo jet crashed into the Pentagon. It has left a hole. There was a collapse of that side of the building. You're seeing the smoke, of course, to my rear. We're reporting from an east side vantage point along a highway that's a major artery here. It is also a place where there has been a constant alert looking skyward, repeated concerns that another plane was heading this way up toward the Potomac. These have been concerns that have been out there for a couple of hours. None of them have been realized yet. Of course, the tragedy was that at about 9:20 this morning Eastern time, that plane crashed into the west side of the Pentagon. You can see overhead frequently helicopters that are circling the area, of course, looking to provide some visual sighting in case anybody, any sort of invader, anything like that, wants to take to the air. It's interesting, these helicopters also will hover on the ground. There are any number of highways here, and they would be looking for suspicious vehicles, that type of thing. We are told there are casualties at the Pentagon. We have not been able to get an accurate figure. We are not exactly sure at the moment of the whereabouts of the Secretary of Defense, but the building has virtually been evacuated, if not totally evacuated. There is heavy security there, investigations going on as they try and find out what happened. We constantly see sirens and hear sirens and see ambulances go by, many of them from Walter Reed Military Hospital on the other side of Washington, clearly going in there to help with whatever casualties there are. We also have seen a couple of times F-16s, at least one F-16 flying overhead a couple of times. That was reported as to be the case of the Pentagon scrambling fighter jets in case another plane was heading this way. But as I said, right now there has been no evidence of another plane coming this way. They're on full alert, of course, and trying to now recover from the severe damage that hit the other side of the building. Judy?
All right, Bob Franken, I just want to remind our viewers that the section of the Pentagon that was hit was between the 4th, 5th, and 6th corridors. This confirmed apparently a little earlier today by Wesley Clark, General Clark, a former NATO chief. He said from what he could tell, it appears this was the Army section of the Pentagon, planning and logistics area where certainly Army leaders would have been working in their offices. I want to read for you now a statement from the Joint Chiefs of Staff, quoting, "We are outraged at this cowardly attack on the people of the United States. Our heartfelt prayers are with the victims and their families, and we stand strongly united behind the President as our Commander-in-Chief." And I want to clarify that this is a statement by the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I want to clarify that this is from the leadership of the Congress. I misunderstood when I was handed this just a moment ago. And continuing, congressional leaders, we will work with the President to ensure that the full resources of the United States government are brought to bear to protect the American people and to punish the perpetrators of these unconscionable acts. May God bless America. And just quickly, before I go back to Aaron Brown in New York, hospitals in Washington dealing with the casualties from the Pentagon Washington Hospital Center, 29 patients A blood shortage, we are being told, in Washington. So any of you who are able to get to a hospital anywhere in the Washington area, it is very possible that there is a need for blood to be donated. So we will just put that information out there as well. Aaron, now back to you in New York.
Judy, thanks. We now are being told that Los Angeles International Airport, LAX, has been evacuated. Again, this is another one of those multi-terminal airports. It's an enormous airport, and that is being evacuated. At least one of the flights, and perhaps two if memory serves me, that has gone down today was headed towards Los Angeles, one towards San Francisco. We also have a report that Disney World in Orlando has been evacuated. Someone said to me a moment ago, before the day is over, everything's going to be shut down, and that seems to be where we're headed. CNN's Richard Roth is on the streets of New York, and he can join us now. Richard, what can you tell us?
Aaron, New Yorkers think they've seen everything, but they'll say they're amazed at what has happened, stunned. Right now behind me, what normally would be the World Trade Center is no more, a huge cloud of white smoke. And right now it's like a war zone. Thousands of New Yorkers streaming north. The mayor of New York City, Rudy Giuliani, has told everyone to get north of Canal Street. We're several miles north of it. Right now, New Yorkers are trying to get out of Manhattan. There's a ferry on the west side going to New Jersey. It's really the only access out. The mayor advising that people should take the subways. We have seen dozens of emergency vehicles, hundreds, firemen being bussed in, decontamination vans coming in, call for blood donations. New Yorkers, their faces, their expressions, stunned, amazed right now. With us, several of those people who witnessed some of the carnage today. Tell us what you saw when you exited the subway station due to a lack of smoke. Eileen.
It was very smoky, and then we exited on Church Street out of the PATH train station. I crossed over to Church and Fulton, and I was trying to get a cell phone. I was trying to get up the block, and I turned around and saw this tremendous fire. Actually, I thought it was a bomb. I couldn't see a plane, and I saw people jumping off the building. Many people just jumping. And in a panic, I had my bag and my cell phone and everything, and I was trying to find a phone because the cell phone wasn't working. Everybody was screaming. Everybody was running. The cops were trying to maintain the calm. And in that haste, people were stampeding. People started screaming that there was another plane coming. I didn't see the plane, but I turned around, and the second building just exploded. And again, all the debris was flying towards us. There was a woman on the ground with her baby. People were stampeding the baby. Myself and another man threw ourselves over the baby and pushed into the building. I got up and I just ran. And I ran towards City Hall, and I said, oh God, why am I running there? And then I started to run towards the water. And then I was by probably Spring Street Prince Street. I was at a payphone, and I heard the rumbling. I thought it was another bomb. I thought it was another building close to me. And then I just ran from the payphone. The man is grabbing me back, telling me to stay here, you're safe. I was like, no way, I'm getting out of here, go north. And then I ran into a shoe store because I wanted to call my husband. That's all I wanted to do was let him know I was alive because he knew I was in the World Trade. And I got my office, and they connected me to my husband, and then we heard the second fall of the World Trade Center. And I'm astonished by the bombing. I just want to make a statement that these New York policemen and firemen, God bless them, they kept us calm. They tried so hard to keep us moving north, and it was just absolute horror. It was horror.
And when you look back there at what would be the World Trade Center?
It's devastating. I can't even look back. My 6-year-old just last week asked my husband and I to take him to the observation deck, and it's gone. And you know what? Americans will persevere, and I don't think that we'll stoop to the level of these zealots.